Breathe, dragons, sing of the first world, forged out of chaos and painted with beauty. Sing of Bahamut, the platinum, molding the shape of the mountains and rivers. Sing too of chromatic Tiamat, painting all over the infinite canvas. Partnered, they woke in the darkness. Partnered, they labored in acts of creation. Breathe, dragons, sing then of Sardior, ruby-red jewel they made in their likeness. Sardior, firstborn of dragonkind, labored alongside Bahamut and Tiamat, shaping the dragons they crafted. Dragons metallic and dragons chromatic. Breathe, dragons, draw in the life gift breathed into you at the dawn of creation. Breathe, dragons, sing of the outsiders, war-bringer gods with their mortal adherents. Teeming, they came to the first world, seeking a home for their legions of followers. Mighty in magic and numbers, conquering deities seized their victory. Fallen was noble Bahamut, Sardior hid in the heart of creation. Breathe, dragons, sing now of Tiamat, raging in battle with no hope of victory. She would not flee or surrender, fighting as death reached its cold claws toward her. Warbringers seized her and bound her, snatched her from death, entombed her in torment, sealed in the darkness forever, captive to gods laying claim to creation. Breathe, dragons, sing of the conquest, seeding the world with their legions of followers, each to their own habitation. Elves in their forests and dwarves in their mountains, orcs in their caverns and canyons, goblins in badlands and halflings in green fields, lizard folk lurking in the marshes, humans throughout every part of creation. Breathe, dragons, sing of Bahamut, maker of peace with the outsider deities, welcomed to mountains celestial, worshipped by some as the platinum paladin. Sing of his journeys of seeking, striving to understand gods and their children, longing for Tiamat's freedom, grieving her loss from the face of creation. Breathe, dragons, sing of her freedom, Tiamat loosed from her prison of torment. Tell how she rallied her children, dragons chromatic, a spectrum of mayhem. Sing of your fury, her vengeance, lightning and venom, ice, fire and corrosion. Five-headed, monstrous and mighty, rampaging on a campaign of destruction. Breathe, dragons, sing of the first world, scattered in infinite seedling realities. Sing of Bahamut and Tiamat, watching its sundering, mourning their labor. Sing too of Sardior, sundered, consciousness scattered in minuscule fragments. Breathe, dragons, you are the inheritors, ruling the wreck of the first world's destruction.
Welcome, everybody, to Teachers in the Dungeon. I am Dan. I am flying solo for this particular episode, and it's going to be a little bit short. Before I go any further, I do need to give credit. That was Elegy for the First World. That is found in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. So, that gives us a little bit of a hint of what I'm going to talk about. This is kind of a bonus episode. We are going to look at another dragon because, tangent here, Tom and I are particularly busy this week. We have our combined teachers conference and fourth annual RPG summer camp coming up in just a couple of days is when it's going to start. And Tom is obviously super busy with that. I'm busy too, but he's the one in charge, so he's got to do some stuff that I won't be able to do. So anyway, I just thought I would lighten the burden a little bit for him and record this week's episode myself. As I said, it will be shorter. But our topic, as you've noticed, for each month, I've tried to pick a dragon that fits the month for whatever reason. And a lot of what I've been doing, because I kind of wanted to focus on gem dragons, I did go with birthstones to an extent. And you probably know that the birthstone for July is ruby. Now, we already talked about red dragons, so that kind of fills in the gap there. But the reason I didn't choose ruby dragons is, the lore in D&D about ruby dragons is pretty conflicted, actually. And according to what I would consider to be full canon, there's actually only one ruby dragon, and that would be Sardior, who was mentioned in the Elegy that was just read. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about Sardior and some of the other conflicting lore about ruby dragons, and learn a little bit more about this most mysterious of gem dragons. So, as I said, some confusion. In earlier lore, and in some of the earlier published Dungeons and Dragons related novels, ruby dragons are just a very rare gem dragon. So I thought what I would do is just give you a brief rundown of the description, the lore, the behavior, all of that connected to the earlier version of gem dragons, and then talk briefly about Sardior itself. So we will jump in. Again, there's not much lore to be mentioned other than the rubies are very rare. As far as their behavior goes, they are neutral, as are all the other gem dragons. And there's just a few little tidbits about them in their earlier version. They do enjoy bathing in magma. That's an image. They can be solitary or in family clans, which doesn't really give you a whole lot of clarity. Just one or the other, which pretty much covers everything, I guess. They are obsessed with consuming the most valuable gems possible. They find them very, very tasty. And so a couple of sources did mention that they are eager to attack dwarves because they know that they will probably find some pretty nice gems on their persons. So it doesn't seem very nice, but again, as a neutral, you've got a lot of leeway there, I suppose. And actually, the only other bit of lore / behavior background that I was able to find is that ruby dragons can crossbreed with amethyst dragons. And I think that's just the result of something that an author chose to do in a novel. And that actually leads us to the one named ruby dragon, Chenowin. This is from the book War in Tether. This particular character was raised in an orphanage as a child and didn't even know that she was a dragon. So again, playing a little bit there with the dragon's ability to polymorph into humanoid form. Usually that doesn't happen until they're adults, but in this case, it happened, I guess, almost from birth. So that's really all there is. As far as their habitat, they like very, very high mountains. They might overlap with red dragons, with whom they have a rather strained relationship, but one that normally is peaceful. Their stats and abilities, very little here. All that I was able to find is that they have super hot fire breath. Kind of reminds me of like a blowtorch or something like that. The source that I found gave how long different materials would survive, and its numbers of seconds. So wood and leather and things like that are obviously just destroyed almost immediately in this super hot breath of a ruby dragon. Metal melts completely after 18 seconds, and magic items would melt after 24 seconds. So even magic items that should be invulnerable will be destroyed by a ruby dragon's fire. Okay, so all of that I think is no longer canon, because according to Fizban's Treasury, there's only one ruby dragon who perished, well, or fragmented at the dawning of the world, essentially, in the D&D universe. So Sardior was created, the first dragon created by Bahamut and Tiamat, and then he, or she, not sure that they give Sardior a firm gender, but Sardior helped them then create both the chromatics and the metallic dragons. And then after that is of course when the gods invaded and disaster struck this original world that the dragons had created. One other little detail, I'm not sure that this is canon, but I did find a source that suggested that before Sardior's demise, she lived in a floating ruby palace so large it orbited the world like a small red moon, which I think was kind of cool. Some other little fragments of lore. Sardior was attended by 5 thanes, one each of the gem dragons. So it'd be amethyst, sapphire, emerald, topaz, and crystal. And then a little bit of mystery. There was a 6th thane, say that quick, 6th thane, an obsidian dragon. For some reason, this obsidian dragon was destroyed by Sardior, and then all of the other obsidians were banished, and no one knows why. So that's kind of cool. Sardior is the patron, I suppose, of psionically gifted individuals in this telling. And so that Sardior will try to aid and protect psionically gifted individuals as he tries to introduce more psionic-based magic to the world. And he also wants to protect against giants, who are, of course, the original enemies of the dragons. Now, all of that is superseded by the Elegy, which suggests that, as we said, Sardior was the first dragon created by Bahamut and Tiamat. When the attack of the outside gods occurred, Sardior hid in the heart of the first world. The first world is considered in D&D lore the material plane in its original form, also created by Bahamut and Tiamat. But Sardior was destroyed when this world was shattered by the invading gods into all of the other sort of interlocking planes that correspond with the material world. So I suppose that you'd see the plane of earth, plane of water, the Feywild, all of those would be fragments as well. When that happened, Sardior itself was also shattered. And according to this telling, those shards of Sardior actually became the consciousness of the gem dragons. So every gem dragon that you would come across would have this little tiny fragment of the primordial dragon created by the original 2, which is kind of a cool thing. And you do kind of keep the psionics there because all of the gem dragons have psionic powers connected with them. So that would make sense that Sardior would be also connected in that way. And that's actually it. it's kind of, as a history teacher, I get kind of geeked out on mysteries in actual history when there's just a few little fragments about a person, like King Arthur. There's only 2 valid comments about Arthur in the historical record. One is that he won 12 battles, but that was written several hundred years after he supposedly lived. And the other one that's actually fairly close to when he lived actually references another hero and says, well, he was great, but he was no Arthur. And that's all there is to go on. Everything else you just kind of have to invent or surmise or create. So Sardior is a little bit like that. There's a few fragments of what I would call canon information in Fizban's Treasury. Everything else is hearsay or invented story. So that gives you kind of a lot to play with. If this is something that's intriguing to you, there's a lot of blank canvas to create on if you wanted to create more legends of Sardior or Sardior connected events in your own campaigns. So that is why we did not do a Ruby Dragon for July, even though that is the birthstone. There's some confusion in the historical record, but canon suggests there was only ever one Ruby Dragon. All right, folks, that is your history lesson for the day from D&D, or perhaps legend lesson, depending on how you want to use the information about Sardior. Tom and I will return next week with a regular episode, more regular length, and I'm not sure if next week is when we'll actually give you the overview of summer camp or if we'll have to wait and do that a bit later. But regardless, we will share with you how that went, as well as the teachers conference. We are very excited about this. We've got a lot of really cool guests that are going to come and help, I think, make this really useful for the teachers that are going to attend in either building up their game clubs, or maybe starting their own summer camp, or maybe integrating RPGs into the classroom directly. So we'll be sure to catch up on all of that. And until then, I will just end with keep your eyes out for fragments of Sardior. You never know where they might pop up. See you next week.